AJ McCarron says Hugh Freeze is full of it, but does he even understand what's going on? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for turning us on and turning us up on a Friday morning. Joining me as he does every single week is my good friend Ike Jones to talk a little Auburn football. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the recent comments of one AJ McCarron, former Alabama quarterback, who says Hugh Freeze is full of shit. Is he? We'll answer that question, and then we'll talk about what's actually happening in a rational manner, like the rational beings that we are. Ike, let's jump straight into this. AJ McCarron made some comments on, I guess, his podcast recently, talking about Hugh Freeze. I'm going to read the whole quote. It's the Dynasty podcast with him, Chris Stewart, and Trent Richardson. He says, Hugh Freeze is full of shit. I think Hugh Freeze is trying to do whatever he can to save face. He's starting to feel pressure at Auburn going into his third year, not having the success that the alumni, the boosters, everybody donating a lot of money thought he would have by this point. I think he's trying to figure out and scramble on why they're not successful. He goes on to say the state of Alabama by Alabama fans, Alabama alumni, whether you like it or not. And I've never been one to just absolutely hate on Auburn. Hell, I've caught hell from Alabama fans for cheering for some of my friends that played at Auburn. If you are from the state of Alabama, I think it is dumb for you not to sign success with life after football is a lot greater, bigger, however you want to describe it. I think that with being an ex-Alabama football player compared to Auburn, those are the comments that we'll start the show with. I've got a lot here, but I want to get your thoughts here on this. Everybody's commenting on where Auburn is at in recruiting. There's a high level of panic. We've reported on it extensively all week long, going back to last week. Auburn down in the 70s and 80s in recruiting. I had a call with John Cohen on Monday of this week where we talked about why Auburn is at where they're at. But what do you think about these outside views of where Auburn is at, and particularly about what AJ McCarron said?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, right? This all spawned from a conversation in regard to comments that Coach Freeze has made in regard to why Auburn is where they are in recruiting, right? And AJ McCarron basically saying, I don't buy that reasoning. And he's doing this to save face. How that makes no sense, right, is if it made sense, then you'd see evidence of the guy who hired him not backing that, right? Like John Cohen would be saying something. You'd have to assume John Cohen is just saying something publicly that he needs to quote unquote say so that he doesn't, throw his coach under the bus. I don't think that that's the case. I think John Cohen's actually driving this ship in the direction of this is how we're handling NIL as an institution. And so Coach Freeze is not saying what he needs to say to save face. He's in lockstep with the guy who hired him. So that's number one. So he can't be full of it and be following his boss who has the pressure or who could apply said pressure that AJ McCarron says is on him to do what he needs to do right now. Number two, Coach Freeze has addressed the whole pressure thing already. And he said, yes, I don't really even feel pressure right now. Like, I understand the weight of expectation that's there, but it doesn't add any additional pressure to me. So he's off base there. And then number three, he goes on this tangent about how former Bama players are bound to be more successful in life somehow than former Auburn players. I don't even know where that came up in the conversation. Like, that was the most random aside that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that I don't even know why it's relevant to bring up in a conversation about where that felt like a guy who played for Bama trying to convince recruits to go to Bama. Yeah. That has nothing to do with Hugh Freeze and his job.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I'm going to take a different angle here. These comments are what happened when the Dunning-Kruger effect kind of takes hold. Somebody who thinks they have the ability to be able to speak on something, and he completely failed at addressing exactly what Freeze said. Think about these comments now. I think Hugh Freeze is full of shit, but you never actually addressed any of the things that he said. You just said, I think he's full of shit. I think he's deflecting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but are the things that he said factually true?
Right. Let's examine what's actually happening and talk about, well, if Freeze knew what he was talking about, he would know X, Y, and Z, because it's clear. Blah, like you're not actually making a factual counter argument. You just going off the handle. So yeah.
So correct. And thank you for that, for adding that to this conversation. So once we start breaking down what he actually said, right? The idea that you may have to spend more money on retention versus acquisition is a reality of the cap.
Correct.
It's a reality of pro sports because they have caps.
Correct.
And it is a reality that Auburn is experiencing. And what John Cohen has essentially espoused publicly in some ways, directly to me, is that they feel like other institutions are acting as if this cap is not real, as if it doesn't exist. And when the NIL clearinghouse, which is NIL Go, gets a hold of some of these deals, they may be in shock to find out they are way over their cap. And they cannot offer these deals because so-and-so, once we determine payee association, remember we covered this on our show, they will, part of the process, step 2 of the process is determining whether the payee has a direct link to the university that qualifies them as a booster or a lifetime contributor in excess of $50K. Well, you and I both know this is happening right now. There are people providing NIL deals to athletes, Isaac, that they're boosters, right? And their deals count toward the cap. Auburn is not saying we're not willing to match these dollars. We're saying as we interpret the rules, this money counts. Now, you guys have been in our comment section all week saying either you agree that Auburn's handling it the right way or John Cohen is taking a huge gamble. But when he says Hugh Freeze is full of it, I'm gonna avoid quoting him directly so we don't get so we don't get flagged. But when he said what he's doing is he's ignoring that the AD is backing him.
Right.
This is not a Hugh Freeze. This is an institutional stance that Auburn is taking. This is not just Hugh Freeze.
Correct.
Hugh Freeze is not going loner on this and saying, you know what? No, man, they got a general manager. They've got an AD. They've got lawyers. They've got a lot of people looking at this saying this is the way to go. How you pin this solely on Hugh Freeze is beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that Hugh Freeze is the guy who had the conversation publicly about it, but again, you have to ignore comments from John Cohen to think to think that this is Hugh Freeze speaking about his recruiting efforts in this year. Like Greg McElroy actually had a quote about this. I believe it was he, or it might have been
I love
Cole
Greg
Kubelik.
McElroy, by the way.
Huh?
I love Greg McElroy, by the way. I think
either he or Kubelik. I don't know which one. I just seen it floating around, but it came from the Mac and Cube show, and he essentially said Coach Freeze and this staff didn't just wake up all of a sudden and forget how to recruit. So this isn't, and John Cohen has said just as much. He's like, these guys know how. So it's not, if you're seeing a marked difference, it's not because they just lost. This isn't some random Monstar thing where somebody ran into the athletic department over there at the facility for Auburn football and took their powers away from being able to understand what the recruiting landscape is like. It's because there actually is something different happening out there on the recruiting trail that is contributing to this. So again, Auburn falling to like 15th or something would be okay. They're having a rough time right now, and you can maybe attribute that to on the field success. Where they are right now, there's a definite explanation, and it speaks to directly what we're talking about right now. The direction this athletic department, not the football team by itself, has taken towards this new NIL landscape, and whether or not they are making the right decisions about where they think this is going to go once everything comes to head here at the top of August.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, we can argue about whether Auburn, not Hugh Freeze, Auburn is taking the right approach here. That's a completely different discussion. But, this would have just a poorly researched take. I don't even think it was researched at all. I think, you're asked a question, you're not qualified to speak on this. You clearly haven't been following enough of it, or you would understand that this is not Hugh Freeze alone. This is Auburn as an institution. And it may be wrong. They could be wrong.
Yeah. Let me clarify. It was Tyler Siskey who made that comment. It was Mac and Cube shared the post, but Tyler Siskey is who made the comments on Hugh Freeze. But anyway, continue.
To your point that I want to expound on, and we'll get to this more after the break. Auburn didn't just wake up one day and forget how to recruit. Now, what's different between, this year and those prior years? We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right across the street from the Chattahoochee Valley Community College, next to Renfro's Supermarket and Marco's Pizza. The Vibe Vault. If you're in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and you're looking to get fresh for the weekend, get fresh for the weekend with the Vibe Vault. Not just barbers, lifestyle consultants. This episode of The War Report is brought to you by our friends at The Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORT to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, The Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. Visit them for all your herbal medicinal needs. The Rogue Shop, longtime supporters of The War Report. Also want to thank our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. The summer is upon us. You want to be outside with your family, grilling some healthy eats, or just staying in shape with some Golden's Cast Iron weights. Work out, grill out, and chill out with Golden's Cast Iron. Ike, let's jump back in here. Is Auburn taking the right approach? What has changed between years, the first two recruiting classes and this one that seems to be failing? Well, the elephant in the room is obviously the house settlement. But there's an idea that I've been pushing and I'm going to be pushing, that the days of teams reeling off back to back top 5 classes could be over as teams struggle with trying to stay under the cap. And when you have successful seasons and successful players, you're spending more money on player retention and less money on player acquisition. This is a reality of pro sports, right? Do you go out and get high-profile free agents, or do you spend all your money just trying to keep your guys from hitting the open market in free agency?
Right.
The Patriots, famously known for not overpaying players, saying, look, we're going to give out reasonable contracts. We're going to fill needs. If you want to be the highest paid player in the NFL, the Patriots were the wrong organization to go to.
Right.
If you want to win and you want to be developed, we're the spot for you. And it doesn't mean that you won't get paid a good amount. It just means if you want top dollar, that's not where you go.
Right.
That's how they decided to manage their cap. On the baseball side, Isaac, we saw the Marlins years back win a World Series with one of the lowest salaries, like payrolls we've ever seen in sports, comparative to their cap. They fielded a World Series winning team. So there are different approaches to this thing. Auburn has said, look, and Hugh Freeze used this example at the ambush event. He said, look at our wide receiver room. There's not a single guy in there I wanted to lose. And to keep them all, it cost. Would it be a stretch to think that you had to pay Perry Thompson some extra money to get him to stay, given he didn't get to play a lot last year?
Right.
No, that's not a stretch. So I again, AJ, if you're gonna comment, and if you're gonna jump in on this subject and then make a fantastical statement like Hugh Freeze is full of shit, you better make sure you're not full of shit first.
Right.
Because I don't think that he knows enough to know what he's talking about here.
And this is the thing, I think that frustrates me about this entire conversation is, to your point, number one, I think he specifically is jumping in on a conversation without complete context around it. He saw a quote and then he's like, oh, like, no, this is not really about Hugh Freeze trying to save face about his quote unquote failed current recruiting class. He is talking about a conversation that's actively ongoing and developing, and what their interpretation is of that conversation, right? And there's this other kind of undercurrent of people who have this notion that somehow AD Cohen's job is on the line based upon his interpretation of this rule. And I think that that's even a premature conversation, right? Because at the end of the day, unless you assume that Auburn will be unwilling to pivot if they're wrong about this on August 1st, then there's no reason to hit the panic button even in regard to that, because they could get to August 1st and they're like, well, shoot, I thought they were going to drop the hammer on these guys. Well, if that's the way everybody else is playing the game, we can go in there because there's still plenty of time to turn that ship and move in a different direction. It's not such a huge pivot that they have to do. Now, will they have lost out on some conversations with some guys? Maybe. But if the only thing that was separating you from those other guys was money, all right, well, great. We can have that money conversation now. I didn't think we were allowed to.
Right.
Hey, pick up the phone. We got a different offer for you today than we had 2 weeks ago when we had this conversation. Does that change your mind? Because you liked Auburn, but the money was just too much to pass up. I got a different number I can throw out there. But if you were right this entire time and you get here and everybody else has to change course, those guys look terrible. You would rather be the guy who underpromised and overdelivered than the guy who overpromised and underdelivered.
I think you raise a good point. There is still time to pivot if you're wrong. That's right. That's the crux of what you just said. If you're wrong, you're Auburn. Signing day isn't until December, man. And the only thing separating you, as you so eloquently put, but between separating you from Alabama or you from Ohio State or you from Texas was money. There's nothing to stop me from putting more money on the table after August 1st.
Right.
And saying, hey, look, that extra $100,000, we see it a little differently now. My sources have told me that Auburn is getting outbid right now on the recruiting trail for the athletes they want by an average of six figures, low six figures. And if you're an athlete and all things are even and you're trying to choose between schools, you're definitely going to the school that's offering you $100K more, Isaac.
Right. It's not even a no-brainer. It's a non-starter conversation. Like,
yeah,
hey man, I'm gonna play because here's the thing. Because the conversations with those kinds of guys are guys that are of the Cam Coleman ilk, right? Like they're gonna be good regardless of what school they go to. They're gonna be good players. So the question is, at this point in time, is the school a good enough fit, right? And from a fit standpoint, if I'm that good, it's pretty much anywhere I want to go. I just want to play at a school where I think I can win. And then what's the number look like?
Right.
If Auburn was in that conversation of, I think it might be a good fit, but the number is way off, then all right, well, we conversation's over with. That's wonderful. Thank you for having me. But no, we can't. You're not even in the ballpark.
Yeah. Look, I want to reiterate, Auburn didn't just wake up and forget how to recruit. Now, right. If you want to say that this is the reason that, like, let's say Auburn was, I don't know. Let's say Auburn was like in the 30s in recruiting, like just outside the top 25, not where you want to be, but just not where they are right now. I think you could say that had a lot to do with results on the field and messaging.
Right.
And, that would be the difference. But for them to be so drastically off, something drastic has to be happening because there's not a lot different about your football team now than there were 2 years ago, right? You had multiple losing seasons with Hugh Freeze coming into the job. So that's been true for 4 years since before Hugh Freeze took the job at Auburn. That hasn't changed, but they still took recruiting to another level in spite of that. So I get, why would they just fall off all of a sudden if it weren't for a change in how they are treating the money?
Right.
The money is a big part of this, right? AJ didn't play under this. He and it's pretty clear he just doesn't understand it, right? I don't think he understands it, and he definitely does not understand it as it pertains to Auburn. There's a shift in college football that's happening before our eyes right now, and there are a lot of people who are speaking on things they have no clue about. We've been informed. We've talked to the players involved. We understand the methodology of the staff, the administration, and AD John Cohen. But if you think that Hugh Freeze has the ability and the autonomy to go rogue on this,
right,
you're sorely mistaken.
Because if the people, why would he go rogue in the opposite direction of money that this is how ridiculous this sounds. Auburn's willing to spend whatever, but Coach Hugh Freeze is like, nah, we're not doing that.
Right.
Why would he do that? Yeah. It just makes no sense. It's a nonsensical statement. And whatever, dude.
I want to go back to what AJ said, because it's always funny to me when people pretend to be objective and then tell on themselves at the end, right? The state of Alabama is ran, by the way. He said that.
Right.
The state of Alabama is ran by Alabama fans, whether you like it or not. Bro, just shut up after that.
Yeah.
The fact that it just came out of your mouth, I don't want to hear nothing you have to say after that.
Yeah, and like I said, he goes on to talk about how much more successful in life you'll be if you were a former Alabama player.
Yeah, just hush, bro. Now, if you can argue under Nick Saban, they were developing players at a higher level than Auburn was. But hey, welcome to the conversation. Listen, that's all.
They were definitely putting more guys in the NFL. They have historically. Sure. I don't need There's not an argument to be had about which university has put more players in the NFL, especially in the wake of the Saban era, right? We're not having that conversation in a serious way. But let's just begin here. Saban's not there anymore, so calm down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what happened in the first year he wasn't there?
Yeah,
you missed the playoffs. For the first time since there was a playoff? Right. You lost 3 games for the first time in forever. Since 2010. Give me a break, bro. This was just such a silly conversation. But the pressure that he says that Hugh Freeze feels, it's not going to show up in recruiting. It's not going to show up in recruiting results. It's going to show up on the football field on Saturdays, and we haven't gotten there yet, brother.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's another point that needs to be if he feels pressure, it's not to recruit better. He's recruited great.
Yeah,
recruiting that's the one result that he can point at and say you can't say anything and so maybe if he's saying the one thing I had, it's being taken away from me, and so I need a reason to explain that, then I can understand that thought process. But again, it doesn't explain the huge disparity, right? Again, if he was in 15th or 18th or 20th in recruiting and he felt like he needed to be 7th, and okay, I could understand trying to excuse some stuff, but this is just it's silly. And like you said, you kind of show your hand when you go into this Alabama players are better at everything.
Yeah, we're better than you. Yeah. Thing at the end. I'll tell you this. I'll close the show on this. This feels more like AJ McCarron just doesn't like Hugh Freeze. This sounds personal to me. But there's no way we're sitting here as we are today pretending like anything he said came from an objective place, because it certainly did not. There was no objective research. There was not a single objective statement. There was not an objective response to anything that Coach Freeze actually said. And there was no acknowledgement that it is not just Hugh Freeze, because quite frankly, you didn't look far enough into it to know that this is an institutional stance that's being taken here, and it is affecting recruiting. that's been talked about in the fan base. I mean, and this is not me defending how Auburn is handling it either.
Right.
Because there are people on both sides of the fence, Auburn fans saying, look, Auburn is hedging here, and some fans feel like it's a bad hedge.
Right.
Other fans feel like this is a smart thing to do. To your point and my point, even if you feel like it's a bad hedge, it's not like it's a stance that they have. It's not a hill they have to die on come August 1st.
Right.
They can always pivot. That's it. But there are a lot of very smart legal minds. And given how Auburn has handled legal crises over the last 15 years, I can't help but think I'm going to put a little trust in the minds that are behind this, that are saying, let's err on the side of caution, because quite frankly, you and I know that Auburn is just one of those schools that if they are doing it wrong, they'll be the ones to get hammered.
Right.
So, look, a great conversation as always, Ike. I appreciate you jumping on with me every single Friday to talk a little Auburn football. And apparently AJ McCarron, guys, if you're in the comments, tell us what you think. Is Auburn handling the cap correctly, or is somebody's job on the line? We want to hear from you. And while you're in the comment section, do us a favor, smash that super thanks button. Help keep the content that we're doing going. We'll be at SEC Media Days in a few days, live from the College Football Hall of Fame, covering all things Auburn. Auburn goes on Tuesday. You know the deal. Hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.